Dude, we are finally live again. Finally. Got the computer issues fixed. We got a hardwired connection. We're rolling. We're rolling. Thank you so much for joining us on the JMULL show on a Friday. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live, wherever you're coming to us from. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. I'm excited. It's just not the same talking into a camera when there's nobody there. It's like doing a podcast by yourself, and who does podcasts by themselves? But that is no more. And I'm very, very excited. Thanks so much once again for joining us at 110sportsmedia.com, twitch.tv/110sports. We got a lot to get to today. On a Friday. We had the NBA draft lottery last night. That's where we're going to start here in a moment. Let me set the agenda for you, though. We've got quite a few things to talk about when it comes to the playoffs. Yesterday on a podcast, I held on and didn't say that the Trailblazers were going to win that series, and boy, was that the right decision. Now, we can talk about what happened between Portland and the Lakers. Damian Lillard dislocated finger. He's supposed to be ready to go for Game 3 tomorrow, but any Damian Lillard that's not completely 100%, and that just becomes that much harder for the Trailblazers. Because when he goes, they go, and you just sort of let the pieces fill in where they may after him. Nurkic can play well. CJ McCollum can play well. Melo can play well. Gary Trent Jr. can knock down threes off the bench. All of it is basically irrelevant if Dame is not an elite player and one of the best players on the floor in that series. So we'll see how that affects him. But either way, last night was not pretty by any stretch of the imagination. We'll get to that in the second segment as well. We've got the podium. It's a Friday, so we got a podium. This one is inspired by the NBA draft lottery. We're talking about the 3 worst number 1 overall picks. Bronze, silver, gold. A couple of these are pretty obvious, and then one we go back quite a ways for the last one, all the way back to 1972 for the third guy in my podium today, and then we'll do FY and we'll get out of here. But I'm really excited to be back, and I'm glad you're here with me on a Friday. I want to start with the NBA draft lottery, and first we'll just start with what the order is for the lottery. Last night was lottery night in the NBA. The Minnesota Timberwolves went in the first round, the number 1 overall pick, went in the lottery. Golden State Warriors 2, Charlotte Hornets 3, Chicago 4, Cleveland, Atlanta, and Detroit in 5, 6, and 7. New York Knicks, again, getting just shafted by the lottery. They're 8th in the lottery order. After last night, 9 Washington Wizards, 10 Phoenix Suns, who, listen, they get another solid player. And we'll talk about some draft, some players here in a few minutes. But listen, with what the Suns put on the court in the bubble, we can talk about a situation in which one more solid player out of the draft makes them very, very interesting and very scary. 11 San Antonio Spurs, 12 Sacramento Kings, 13 the New Orleans Pelicans, and 14th was the Grizzlies, but 14th is the Boston Celtics because the Grizzlies had I believe it was top 4 protected pick, and of course it's a 14th pick, so it did convey, so the Grizzlies lose that first round pick to the Boston Celtics, but that's what we got here. And I think this is going to change the situation in the lottery. When it comes to, I'm not sure it'll change the number 1 pick because, so the top 3 players in this draft, pretty much the consensus, and there have been reports that the lottery is going to get weird very, very quickly. Yeah, poor Knicks. But there are reports that this is going to get weird quick. And it could get weird from the very first pick. Now, we'll see, but in general, the consensus is the top 3 prospects in this draft: LaMelo Ball, who really he's gone from this tiny little kid in Chino Hills to, spending some time being irrelevant because nobody knows really where he's playing, coming back to playing basketball at the amateur level here in the States, going overseas multiple times. Really, his path has been so unique and so interesting, and whatever you want to put on it. I think it kind of sucks that we never saw him in college basketball. I think he'd have a very Lonzo Ball type. Of course, him being his brother, and LaMelo in a lot of ways being a more sought after prospect, at least out of coming into the NBA draft. Than his brother was. He at one point was committed to UCLA, and it would have been really quite something to see him once again, to see another Ball brother on that level, especially considering that LiAngelo got dismissed from UCLA for stealing in China, which is still ridiculous that ever happened. But nonetheless, LaMelo Ball is absolutely one of the top 3 prospects in this draft, along with James Wiseman, the Memphis prospect. Went to East High School, won championships at the high school level with Penny Hardaway, and it might not have been with Penny Hardaway, but was coached by Penny Hardaway, and won state championships at East High School just down the road from the University of Memphis. Spent about 27 seconds at Memphis before being deemed ineligible because Penny Hardaway helped his family move from Nashville to Memphis, and then he left. He was almost done with his suspension or his ineligibility suspension, and then he decided that he was just going to forego the rest of his college basketball season. So after being so highly sought after from University of Memphis fans, they got him for about 25 minutes, and then he was off to the next chapter of his career quicker than anybody thought he would, which was really unfortunate. But James Wiseman up there as well. And then the Georgia guard, Anthony Edwards, who, 6'5", averaged 19.1 points and 5.2 rebounds in his one season at Georgia, but 40.2% from the field and 29.4% from three-point range. So, those are the top 3 prospects. Seems like more of a crapshoot with G League than with the high school season being canceled. There's not a lot of... That's true. That's true. And I think, as we get more avenues to the NBA, it's going to become even more of a... The way scouts look at talent, I think, is going to change quite... Because, for the last... 15 years, however long it's been since, it's something like that, since the one and done rule was put into place, it's pretty, you have your guys every once in a while. Anthony Simons had a postgraduate year, and so he came straight to the NBA out of high school. But for the most part, you're looking at either guys from Europe or the college basketball world. So your gauge for... You only have to have one gauge for looking at talent. And as you add more and more of this, more and more avenues to get to the league, you have to have more gauges. You're looking at a guy who hasn't played... he didn't play college basketball. Of course, he dominated high school basketball because that's what everybody who plays Division I college basketball did. They dominated high school. But then he went to the G League, and even if he did play, even if they're playing G League teams, really you're not seeing him in high pressure instances. That's why the NCAA tournament, I think, is such a big deal, because Dante DiVincenzo a couple of years ago was a top 20 pick in the NBA draft simply because of what he did in the draft lottery. Not in the draft lottery, in the NCAA tournament. And he had 31 points in the national championship game for Villanova, and all of a sudden he's a highly sought-after recruit. It's a good point, though. There's not a lot of film in general. A lot of the there was a good amount of the summer basketball that was canceled as a result of COVID-19. Of course, you have these guys that are going, Daishen Nix, Jalen Green, Jalen Smith. Going to this G League route, Isaiah Todd going this G League route instead of going to college. So you have a lot of gauges here, which makes this more interesting. Maybe not quite as much this draft, but the next draft for sure. You've got the top 10 guys in this draft. the majority of them went to college, either that or they're coming from overseas, which is not an uncommon occurrence in the NBA draft. But I'm not sure. And here, before we get started, I'm 100% one of those people that is all for. I'm all for just picking the best guy available, especially when you're now. Maybe if you get to the 30th pick, you draft somebody over one guy who may be slightly worse, but he fits into a spot that you need more depth on your bench. Maybe you do it then. But when we're talking about the top of the draft, you should never be picking for position, in my opinion. If you have the number one pick in the draft, you shouldn't even be looking at what position they play. You should be looking at who is the best player in the draft, and you take that guy. You take that guy. You can get methodical once you're getting to the second round, where you're really taking shots on everybody, because for the most part, most second round picks don't pan out in the NBA, at least not in any real way. So I'm all for, take the best guy available regardless of position and figure it out later. But with that being said, I think for quite a while, LaMelo Ball and James Wiseman both sort of fall into places that the Minnesota Timberwolves don't really need. You've got D'Lo, who's a ball-dominant guard. A ball-dominant guard who, do you put LaMelo Ball in the backcourt with D'Angelo Russell? If LaMelo can make better decisions on the court and shoot the ball better and take better shots, all these are the biggest questions about LaMelo Ball, by the way. I mean, of course, he's a 6'6" guard that can really pass it, but he does a lot of things. He does some bad decision making, takes a lot of bad shots, and has since he was at Chino Hills, since his brothers left to go to UCLA and beyond. But do you take that shit? Honestly, there's part of me that thinks that somebody like Obi Toppin would be really interesting to put next to. I think in my opinion, Obi Toppin should be considered for the number one pick. I think he's that good. He won't be. He better not fall outside of the top 5. I mean, every general manager in the NBA should deserve to lose their job if they let him get out of the top 5, or at least those five GMs that picked somebody not named Obi Toppin. But I think he's an interesting fit. You put him next to Karl-Anthony Towns. You let D'Angelo Russell run the show from the point guard position, or you could go with LaMelo Ball and put him in the backcourt next to D'Lo, and then you have a really interesting LaMelo Ball, D'Angelo Russell backcourt. The only question there is, would it be good enough would they complement each other enough, and would the offensive ability of that backcourt offset the defensive liability that backcourt would be? That's a completely fair question to ask. I think there are reasons to believe that it could, but then of course, if you've got a guy like LaMelo Ball who's not producing on the offensive end enough, and you need him to, and then he's not playing defense, then you're in a sticky situation. But I think Anthony Edwards was up there. James Wiseman and him were sort of interchangeable, and I think because the Warriors got the second overall pick, that James Wiseman should be the quote unquote favorite. We'll call him the odds favorite to actually be drafted second. What's up, Rower? How you doing, man? Because you're not going to put a ball-dominant scorer, another one, on that Warriors team. You got Draymond, you got Clay, you got Steph. You don't need anybody else to handle the ball to be a ball-dominant guy. Clay's not a ball-dominant guy, but you get my point. You don't need another shooting guard, certainly not one that's not going to shoot it well, because, maybe Anthony Edwards gets to the point where he's a 37-38% three-point shooter, and that would be great. But I think we're talking more 34-35, a very Jimmy Butler-esque type of scorer. Maybe, DeMar DeRozan, just a guy who doesn't. Now he's more than happy to shoot threes, but somebody might tell him when he gets to the NBA, like, dude, you need to get better. You need to stop. And if he gets to the point where he's a 35, 36, 37, 38 three-point shooter, then we're talking about a guy that can be one of the better scorers in this draft. And he probably will be regardless. But the James Wiseman fits into that puzzle, I think, way better than anybody else. You throw him in there with Clay, Steph, and Draymond, and he's arguably the best talent anyways. There are people, we haven't seen James Wiseman play in, months, almost a year at this point. By the time you see him in the NBA, it will have been over a year since we had last seen him play at Memphis. And I think this is almost a situation where it might not have hurt him that he left Memphis, but it certainly didn't help him. I think, a guy like Wiseman playing in the AAC had a chance to really shine. I think he did, and because for the most part he's going to be the best player on the floor every time he steps on it. And he didn't stick around, and there were already questions about, is he really the best player in this class, so on and so forth. And he just didn't really give himself a chance to prove that he was. With that being said, he's incredibly talented, and he's probably the best fit for Golden State. Now, who knows? Maybe deciding to forego the rest of his season at Memphis was the best decision he made. He was doing it to quote unquote prepare for the draft, and he went and prepared for the draft, and now he's going to be elite. That's certainly part of that could be part of the equation. But when it comes to Wiseman, I think he's definitely the best fit for the Warriors, and for Charlotte, I think they need another. I think they found something in Devontae Graham, but they just need more. They need somebody else to score, especially with the Kemba Walker leaving. You have Scary Terry, but I mean, Scary Terry didn't get paid by Boston for a reason. Terry Rozier, he didn't get paid by Boston for a reason, because he's simply not worth. He wasn't worth the money that he was going to get, and Charlotte just needs somebody else who can score. And he's big, he's strong, he's athletic, 6'5". If he can shoot it a little bit better, then he's going to be really good. He's super young. He won't even be 20 years old until August 2021. So there's a lot of reason to like him. We'll see if he can apply himself on the defensive end. He should be able to dominate on the defensive end. 6'5", 220. Nobody should be able to push him around, but he really just lacked any sort of effort on the defensive end in his 1 year at Georgia for Tom Crean. Then you've got, like I said, you got Cleveland, Atlanta, Detroit, New York, Washington, Phoenix, San Antonio, Sacramento, New Orleans, and Boston. Listen, I think one of the more interesting guys that people are going to learn about quickly is Onyeka Okongwu from USC. Listen, you probably don't know a whole lot about that guy because he played for an unranked Pac-12 team. And that's just, Arizona had one of the best recruiting classes in the country in Nico Mannion and Zeke Naji and Josh Green. Probably didn't hear a whole lot about them because they didn't end up being fantastic, and it's the Pac-12, so they were on at 11 o'clock at night. But Okongwu, 16.2 points, 8.6 rebounds, 1.2 steals, and 2.7 blocks per game in his 1 year at USC. And listen, he's 5'9", and not 5'9", excuse me, 6'9", and playing the center position, which, yes, he's probably 6'9", 245. Yes, he's probably a little undersized, but every time we talk about an undersized center, I just go to Bam Adebayo in Miami. Bam is 6'9", I think he's 6'9", 260. 6'9", 255. This year, Bam is averaging 16 points, 10.2 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 1.1 steals, and 1.3 blocks. When the Heat play the Bucks in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs, Bam will be the guy to guard Giannis. Bam, and I'm not sure Bam is completely responsible for it, But the modern NBA big is, Bam doesn't shoot the three ball well. So what the NBA center is going to end up being nowadays is either a 7-footer who can stretch the floor on the pick and pop, or a 6'9" guy who can guard multiple positions and is a playmaker. I mean, Bam is a playmaker. He can score the basketball. He can pass it. He rebounds it phenomenally. He's still got some rim protecting abilities. And clearly Okongwu has that. I mean, he averaged 2.7 blocks per game. In the Pac-12, if you don't have those abilities, you're not going to average 2.7 blocks per game. It's just not going to happen. And it did, along with 8.6 rebounds. So I think I think there's a world in which Okongwu plays a very similar role to what Bam Adebayo does. I think there's certainly room for that. And the 6'9" center is going to, we're talking about a 6'9" center and a 7-foot power forward like Kristaps. Like that's kind of what we're talking about here. And I think we're going to continue to see that more and more. The other guys I want to point out here in the lottery, Tyrese Halliburton, currently in this mock draft I've been looking at over at CBSSports.com. Tyrese Halliburton out of Iowa State, he's like Obi Toppin in the way that he's older. He wasn't a highly recruited guy. But he's going to be such a good NBA player. I find it really hard to believe that he's a 6'5" guard. He lights up the stat sheet, 15.2 points, 6.5 assists, and 5.9 rebounds, while shooting 41.9% from 3-point range. He suffered an injury in February, so he didn't get to finish a season, but of course they didn't play much farther than that anyways. You got Saddiq Bey, who I love, out of Villanova. He shoots it really well. He's a physical specimen as well. There's a chance that Villanova is the best team in the country anyways without him this season. But if he was coming back, we'd be talking about a team that was going to be as good as those teams that won national championships for Villanova earlier in this part of the decade, in the back half of the 2010s. Last season for Villanova, 16.1 points, 4.7 rebounds, 2.4 assists. He shot 45% from the 3-point line on 5.6 attempts per game. Like, we're talking about he's an NBA athlete, 6'8", 216. Like, that's a perimeter guy that anybody wants right now. He's going to be able to guard multiple positions. He moves well. He shoots it beautifully. And if he can, right now, and he's going to end up somewhere around 10th, and 10th is the Phoenix Suns. I like that a lot for Phoenix. If you can put another shooter around Devin Booker, around what's going on over there. I'm not, Saddiq Bey's not going to, I mentioned at the top of the show, Saddiq Bey's not going to change the trajectory of the Suns next season, but he can make them better. I think he could. But that's the lottery. Again, you got the Timberwolves at 1, Golden State, Charlotte, Chicago, Cleveland, Atlanta, Detroit, New York, Washington, and Phoenix. That's the top 10. And then 11 through 14, San Antonio, Sacramento, New Orleans, and Boston. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the what's going on in the NBA playoffs right now. It's quite a different tune from what I was talking about just on Wednesday. But hey, we don't have to talk about what I said on Wednesday because a lot of it was wrong. But we'll do that next on the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Friday. Thanks so much for joining us. 110sportsmedia.com/live, twitch.tv/110sports. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. Listen, things got a whole lot more interesting in the playoffs yesterday. Much more interesting. First of all, you had the 1 seeds get back on track I mean, you knew that they were going to. The Bucks won by 15. The Lakers did borderline illegal things to the Trailblazers, 111-88, and listen, that scoreline is not doing it justice with just how not close it was. The Trailblazers went 8 of 29 from the three-point line. Only Damian Lillard had more than 15 points, and only 3 players were in double figures. Listen, and it wasn't even LeBron who got mad. It was Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis had 31 points on 21 shots, 11 rebounds, 3 assists. And then you just had contributions from everybody else. KCP, after going, it was like 0 of 9 from the field and had 1 point in 29 minutes in game 1, 16 points on 5 of 8 shooting. He did nothing else. He had 2 rebounds and literally nothing else. But he went 4 of 6 from the three-point line, had 16 points. And that's what you need KCP to do on a nightly basis now. You don't need him to always be quite so efficient, I suppose. But 14 to 20 points every night from KCP. That's what you need. LeBron had 10, but he had a plus minus of plus 23. He had 7 assists and 6 rebounds, 2 steals. It was a largely uneventful game for LeBron. I mean, they were so far ahead that, AD had 31 points in 29 minutes. LeBron had 10.7 assists and 6 rebounds in 27 minutes. JaVale McGee played only 13 minutes, but had 10 points and 8 rebounds. Danny Green needs to play better. He needs to shoot the ball better. It just needs to happen. But I think that'll come. He's a good shooter, and he's a really good playoff shooter. Like, that's the head-scratching thing about what's happening to Danny Green right now is that he's been elite in the he was elite in the play. He was really good in the playoffs last year for Toronto, and he was great in the playoffs for San Antonio. So his ability to perform in the playoffs isn't the issue. It's not like he's notorious for not being able to shoot the ball when it really counts, because he's not. He's not notorious for that. He's notorious for quite the opposite, actually. But J.R. Smith gave you 11 off the bench. Dwight Howard in 19 minutes gave you 9 off the bench. You got 7 from Kuzma. And I really thought they were going to switch up the starting lineup. They didn't. They went with the same 5 in the starting lineup, and this is why this right here was why I really kept myself from saying, "Oh, Trailblazers got this series." And so the Lakers showed up in a big way on Thursday. So shouts to the Lakers for getting it back on track. The Bucks also got it back on track, much better on the defensive end. And Vucevic destroyed them again. But they held everybody else to a much lower percentage. The Magic only were 7 of 33 from the three-point line. In game 1, they were 19 of 40 or something like that. 16 of 40, something. So a pretty drastic decrease in the number of three-point shots made. You got, Chris Middleton had 2 points in 31 minutes. That has to change. They're not going to win a playoff series against a good team if that doesn't change. What did change, though, was Brook Lopez had 20 points on 8 of 12 shooting, was 4 of 8 from the three-point line. So he sort of offset Vucevic a little bit. You got 15 from Connaughton and 11 from Dante DiVincenzo off the bench. So you got some bench production there. Kyle Korver came in and knocked down 50% of his three-pointers. That's what he's there to do in his 16 minutes per game. I'm still concerned. I mean, Giannis had 28 and 20. The guy's just a freak, hence the nickname, I suppose. But I'm still not... The defense was way better, which was where they needed to start. The issues in game 1 weren't necessarily the offensive end. There are certainly questions about the offensive end, but the defense was just bad. And Vucevic, his ability to shoot the three-pointer is really going to... It's going to scare the Bucks just because Brook Lopez doesn't want to spend all his time out on the three-point line. He's just not that kind of center. He doesn't have to guard like that a lot. But when you force him to actually step out, He's just a little slow on that, and it puts, Vucevic gets a lot of open looks, which is, 32 points and 10 rebounds, shooting better than 50% from the field. Clearly, he's getting the looks that he wants. It's just a matter of making sure it doesn't hurt you too much. Vucevic is probably the best player of that type that they'll see unless they get to Anthony Davis in the NBA Finals, of course, but AD presents other problems for Brook Lopez rather than, other than just being able to shoot the three. In the Eastern Conference, we're talking about, so in round 2, you're talking about the Heat, which, Bam is not that guy. They don't really have that stretch big that's going to shoot a lot of threes for you, but you've got Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol from Toronto, who both of them certainly have three-point shooting abilities. Both of them have turned themselves into really formidable perimeter threats at the center power forward position over their years in the NBA. So that could give them some issues. But then again, you've got other players on the Toronto team that you'd rather run your offense through. You don't necessarily feel horrible about running your offense through Marc Gasol, but when you've got Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, you've got these other guys that you'd much rather run plays through. So, but Orlando is running their offense through Vucevic, so he's gonna get more shots. I mean, Marc Gasol's never going to shoot 23 shots again in a game in his life. It's just not going to happen. We can take a look and see how many shots he took in their most recent game, a 104-99 victory over the Nets. That was the Nets' chance to make this thing interesting, and they weren't quite able to pull out. But Marc Gasol played 17 minutes and took 2 shots and had 0 points in that game. So it's not exactly the same threat. As for across the rest of the association, the Nuggets defense is horrible. Horrible. The Jazz just get whatever they want, and they're just throwing guys in a blender in the pick and roll. That's their entire offense right now, is a pick and roll, because they got a lot of ball handlers and nobody in the corners, like Bojan Bogdanovic. They're without him, so it's a lot of on-ball scoring. It's a lot of pick and roll with Rudy Gobert, pick and roll, drive, find somebody like Royce O'Neal or Jordan Clarkson on the three-point line, and they're just getting Joe Ingles on the three-point. They're just getting whatever they want because Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. just look so freaking lost in the pick and roll defense. Their defense has been really bad. The Jazz shot 51% from the field in Game 2, a 124-105 win for the Jazz. They were 20 of 44 from the three-point line. You're not going to win any. Listen, here's the thing. The Nuggets shot 46% as a team, shot 48% from the three-point line, knocked down 13 of them, went to the free throw line 23 times, made 18 of them, out-rebounded the Jazz. But the Jazz had 10 more assists. They had 48 points in the paint, outscoring them in that category by 20. The Jazz at one point in this game led by 31. And a lot of that has to do with the Denver defense just being bad. I mean, when you look at that lineup, it's not hard to understand why they're not great on the defensive end. I mean, we're talking about Michael Porter Jr., who just looks lost. 28 points and 6 rebounds, but he didn't do anything else. Certainly on the defensive end. I mean, Jokic and Murray, neither of them are known for their defense. The Nuggets defense has to be better. It's just been so bad. And as a result, you're letting a Jazz team score 125 points on you on back-to-back nights. And they're about to get now we'll see what happens if the Nuggets get Gary Harris and Will Barton back, but Mike Conley's returning in Game 3, and that's another guy who's made his hundreds of millions of dollars in the NBA because of what he can do in the pick and roll and how he can, punish bad defenses. He can knock down shots. He can create shots for other people. He's really great in the pick and roll. And clearly, every time you put the Nuggets in a situation where they have to communicate on defense, aka a pick and roll, they've been really bad. And Mike Conley's just going to put more pressure on you like that. And not to mention, he's another guy capable of scoring against a defense that's really struggling. So I still think the Nuggets will win this series. I think they'll get good enough, or they'll just score enough, because you know there's only so much you can do against that offense, similar to the Nuggets, that they'll just score enough to win this series. But they have serious issues and serious things to address when it comes to the defensive side of the basketball. That's the story with Denver and Utah. The Sixers just sort of laid down in Game 2 against Boston, 128-101. Listen, it's clear that the biggest thing, you know, from a matchup perspective, the fact that they don't have Ben Simmons to guard Jason Tatum has been just really tough, and Embiid's just not going to be able to do enough to make this happen. They're not. Brett Brown, you know, coached a really bad game in that one in particular. There's just some things that he should have done that he didn't do. Listen, just put 4 shooters around Embiid. Just do it. Just put as many shooters on the floor as you can. Screw the defense. Just put the shooters on the floor. Embiid, Harris, Richardson, Milton, Burks. Just put them on the floor. Put a bunch of shooters on the floor and see what happens. Because that's how you win a game in this series. You put Embiid in the middle, and you put a bunch of guys around him who can shoot it. Spread the floor a little bit, give him a little space. Either way, the series is over. They just sort of laid down. Brett Brown is gone. If you outscore them, you win. That's about right. You put to quote Popovich, we're trying to put the ball in the little orange cylinder. And apart from Embiid, they're having a really hard time putting the ball in the orange cylinder. And when you're playing a team like the Celtics, that's not a recipe for success, even in the slightest. Luka Doncic is a beast. Elite, absolutely elite. After 11 turnovers in Game 1, he got blitzed a little bit. 1 turnover, 28 points, 7 assists, 8 rebounds. The Mavericks won Game 2. I'm not betting on the Mavericks to win this series, but I didn't think that after 2 games I'd be able to say that the Mavericks can win this series. Meaning that there is a path for them to win this series. And I didn't think that was going to be the case. I thought that they could make it interesting, but after 2 games I think, okay, the Clippers are just too much, and the Clippers are going to, you know, control the series. That's not the case. I mean, this is a real series. It's going to go at least 6, if not 7. And I didn't think that was going to be the case. I mean, yes, Paul George really struggled, 4 of 17 from the field. But you got your 23 from, you know, but you lost by 13. It's not like you lost by 6. I mean, if Paul George gets 25, you still lose the game. So there's certainly a way in which they lose this series. It's not going to happen. I still think that they're going to be able to handle it, them being the Clippers. But the Mavericks are for real. And they're going to be for real for a long time with that core, as young as it is, and the pieces that they have. The Rockets went up 2-0. That's surprising. Again, you know, they just didn't get it. In the first game, the Thunder didn't get enough from their guards. In the second game, they didn't get enough from the other people. Chris Paul didn't have a great game. And Dennis Schroeder didn't either. SGA had 31, so he was much better in Game 2. But you had a very balanced offense. I mean, James Harden had 21. You had 7 guys in double figures. 7. James Harden only had 21. Only took 16 shots. Eric Gordon took 4 more. And they won this game 111-98. So that series, you know, the Thunder are really on their heels there, and I didn't think the Thunder would be on their heels there. But here we are. 2 games in, the Rockets are 2-0 up. and very much in control of that series. Coming up next, we'll do the podium and then some FYIs. We got out of here on a Friday. You're watching the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Well, I apologize for that. I don't really know what happened there. I apologize. We're back. Sorry about that. If you refresh, if you haven't, I apologize for that. If it still is not back up, I don't know when I cut out, but the podium, top 3 worst number 1 picks of all time. Let's break it down right now. So the Trailblazers, they're going to have 2 guys on this list, and I feel kind of bad about it. I do. I feel kind of bad about it. LaRue Martin, bronze, the 1972 number 1 overall pick. Let me give you LaRue's stats real quick. He played 4 seasons in the NBA. And it's not like he was super unhealthy and was injured a lot. It just never happened. He played in 271 games in his career. But he averaged only 5.3 points and 4.6 rebounds. He never played more than 16.9 minutes per game in a season. And here's the kicker. LaRue Martin was drafted ahead of Bob McAdoo and Julius Erving, who both are Hall of Famers. Before the 1976 season, Martin was traded to the Supersonics, but he was cut before the season and ended up retiring not all that long after that. For a first-round pick. Bronze medal. And in silver, we go right back to Portland with Greg Oden. Now, Greg's got, technically he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons on his basketball reference page. He played 105 games in the NBA. And listen, here's the thing. He wasn't bad at all. In 2008 and 9, he played 61 games, averaging 21 minutes per. He didn't play in his rookie season because of his knee. 8.9 points, 7 rebounds, a block per game. In 2009-10, 21 games, 23 minutes per game, 11.1 points, 2.3 blocks, and 8.5 rebounds. In those 21 games, he was pretty good. But then 2010-11, didn't play. 2011-12, did not play. 2012-13, did not play. And then he played 23 games for Miami in 2013-14, and that he played 9.2 minutes per game, averaging 2.9 points and 2.3 assists. He was so good at Ohio State. So good. And his 1 year at Ohio State, we're talking 15.7 points, 9.6 rebounds per game, 105 blocks in 32 games. I mean, I don't know, what's that quick math? 105 blocks in 32 games, that's over 3 per game. 105 divided by 32, 3.28 blocks per game. That's absolutely ludicrous. He was really great at Ohio State, but his injuries never let him get it going, and as a result, he's one of the bigger busts. I hate using that word because it's not his fault. This next guy is a bust, and as a result of him just not being very good. But, Greg, he was hurt, and I try not to bash anybody for being hurt. Like, it happens. And, you wish it wouldn't, but there's a difference between being a bust because you're just not good and being a bust because you just are injured. Either way, he's one of the 3 worst, ended up being worst number 1 overall picks. But I think it's not necessarily because of his skill, but just because of those injuries. And then finally, the holy grail of bad number 1 overall picks. the UNLV product himself. 4 teams and 4 seasons. Mr. Anthony Bennett. Listen, 16.1 points, 8.1 rebounds per game. Like, he was good. He was. Now, the 2013 NBA draft was a snooze fest. You know, so in the top 5, here's the top 10 of that draft. Anthony Bennett. Then you have Victor Oladipo. Okay. Otto Porter, Cody Zeller, Alex Len, Nerlens Noel, Ben McLemore, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Trey Burke, and CJ McCollum. Now, the biggest part of this draft is the fact that Giannis went 15th, but nobody knew who Giannis was, and he was, about that big around when he got into the NBA. Some of your other later in the draft highlights: Dennis Schroeder was taken at 17th, but there's very little to write home about in the 2013 NBA draft. Anthony Bennett's not one of those players to write home about. If you're writing home about it, you're writing home because you're laughing about how ludicrous it is that he went first overall. He played for 4 teams in 4 seasons: Cleveland, Minnesota, Toronto, Brooklyn. He played in 52 and 57 games his first 2 seasons in the league, but then didn't play more than 23 in his next 2, and then he was out of the league. Never averaged more than 5.2 points, never averaged more than 3.8 rebounds. Number 1 overall pick. Never played more than 15.7 minutes per game. He was a train wreck. And very quickly reminded people why, very quickly showed people that he wasn't number 1 overall pick caliber. And the Cavaliers bit the bullet for it. So that's the Podium, and that's just tough for the Cavs. They got Kyrie while LeBron was gone, but if they got another guy, they've been even better when LeBron got back. But they didn't, and that's the result. They still got a championship out of it. So being really bad in the NBA for several years still ultimately paid off later for that franchise. But that's the Podium. We do that every Friday. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll get back with FY before we get out of here on a Friday. You're watching the JMULL Show on 110sportsmedia.com. Welcome back to the JMULL Show on a Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. 110sportsmedia.com/live, twitch.tv/110sports. If you haven't checked out all the stuff that's going on over on the site today over the last week, subscribe to our newsletter. If you haven't, you should be getting an email in your inbox today with all the content from this week. One of the best ways to not miss anything that happens on the site. For your information, the NBA Draft Lottery last night, the pecking order in terms of the lottery, 1 through 14, we got Minnesota, Golden State, Charlotte, Chicago, Cleveland, Atlanta, Detroit, New York, Washington, Phoenix, San Antonio, Sacramento, New Orleans, and the Boston Celtics. That's your draft lottery position. We'll see how, in what order LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, Obi Toppin. Let's see. We'll see how what order they end up being drafted in. But nonetheless, that is your draft lottery. We now know what it will actually look like. Thom Brennaman was suspended after using a homophobic slur on the air. He wasn't fired. Why can't we just fire people who do this? I don't understand. Fox Sports saying that he's not going to be a part of football coverage because he doesn't represent what the values of Fox Sports essentially. Okay, then fire the guy. If he doesn't represent your values, fire him. But they didn't fire him. They suspended him. And yet another person who is part of the problem is still has a job in sports. And that's needs to be fixed. And then, of course, for your information, I'll be back on Monday right here, 110sportsmedia.com/live at 11 a.m. Eastern. On Tuesday, we'll have the Touchline Talk with Josh Doring and Around the Bases with Chris Brown. Both of those things coming on Tuesday of next week. But I'll be back on Monday. Same place, same time. Take care of yourself this weekend. Have a good time. Stay safe. And I'll see you back here on Monday.